Hello everyone, welcome back to EM Enclosures. This week we're going to be talking about the top 5 most common reptiles as pets. So let's just get right into it. Now starting off with number 5, we're going to be talking about leopard geckos. Now almost any reptile or pet store that you go to, you're going to find at least one of these guys. Now this one right here is a Tremper albino, and there are so many different morphs of leopard geckos. There's so many different patterns and colors that you can choose from. Even if your basic leopard gecko isn't enough, you could always spend a little bit more money and get yourself a nice morph that looks a little bit cooler. But even then, a normal morph leopard gecko would still make a great pet. They're very easy to take care of. They don't require that much heat. You could really just get away with a heat mat. That's what I use. And they don't need the biggest enclosure. You could get away with a 20 long. That's what I use. As you can see, leopard geckos are very good with handling. You don't really have to worry about getting bit, and even if you do get bit, it's not going to hurt. They don't really have teeth, so they're just a nice little pet gecko. If you have kids or something like that, then it'd be a nice little addition. But you do have to make sure that you, of course, take care of them properly. It isn't that difficult, but you do want to make sure you're doing everything correct, so do your research. Now for number 4, we're going to be talking about crested geckos. Now, if you've seen my recent video, I talked a lot about crested geckos and told you guys a lot about why I like them and why they're such great pets. But we're just going to bring them up in this video because they are just such a great beginner pet. You can find these guys for pretty cheap. They are pretty common, around as common as the leopard geckos, honestly. Now, they are going to need a totally different type of setup, as you can see. I posted a video a while ago showing you how I made this bioactive setup for my crested geckos, so make sure you go check that out. But leopard geckos and crested geckos are going to be totally different. A leopard gecko does not need that high of humidity and normally is going to be found in the same areas as a bearded dragon, kind of a sandy, deserty area. Now, with these crested geckos, they're going to be found in the exact opposite locations. Now, these guys are going to be found in New Caledonia, which is an amazing tropical island in the middle of the ocean. And tropical, of course, means that there's going to be a lot of humidity. So as you can see, I have this nice tropical jungle vibe in this terrarium. I mist it once to twice every day, and he's doing perfectly fine. Your crested gecko can of course survive on just the paste crested gecko diet, but I of course love to feed insects as well because they just love to eat insects. Now, I think these guys are great beginner pets, and they are also so common. You're going to find these guys almost as much as you find the leopard geckos, and you can find them for pretty good price as well. I got this guy for under $100, and he's still a nice looking crested gecko. A nice Harley Quinn partial pin. So now that we're done talking about crested geckos, let's hop into number 3. Now, coming in at number 3, we're going to be talking about ball pythons. Now, ball pythons are going to be one of the more pricier items on this list, but you can still find them for pretty cheap. Now, a common ball python, which this is, I got for $100 at my local pet store, but you can honestly find them for almost free. People are practically giving these guys away. A lot of people will get a ball python not knowing exactly what to do, and then they'll get bored of it, and then they'll end up getting rid of it for as low as $25-$30. So if you're interested in getting yourself a ball python, I would definitely recommend finding somebody that's getting rid of theirs. Now, ball pythons are fairly easy, but their enclosure size is going to be one of the more bigger ones on this list. Now, this is just a juvenile ball python sitting under 3 feet. So I have it sitting in a 40 breeder right now. But once it gets bigger, it's definitely going to need a bigger enclosure. Now these guys can get anywhere from 4, 5, maybe even 6 feet long. So eventually I'm going to be putting it in probably a 6 foot, maybe even 8 foot long enclosure. You want to make sure that your animals have as much space as they want and they have as much room to do everything that they would need to do. Now, of course, you are going to have to feed these guys rodents. I feed mine frozen thawed. Now, ball pythons also are pretty known for going off of food. My ball python here actually has been off of food for almost 2 months now, but I'm not too worried. These snakes can go up to 6 months without eating anything, and normally with any snake, if you see its tail at the end, it'll start to get bony and really thin, and then it'll fatten out to the normal width. That shows that the snake is using its fat reserves inside of its body because it's not getting enough food. But if you can see here, my snake is not having that problem. So I'm not worried about it not eating. I think it's just going off of food for whatever reason. Um, but it should eat eventually. I'm not too worried about it. Now, if it goes another month or so without eating, that's when I'll probably try to do some assisted feeding. But I'm not too worried about it. She's doing perfectly fine, as you can see. Now, if you have any names for this ball python, you can drop those in the comments. I actually don't really have a name for this yet. Um, I had a few ideas, but I don't really like them that much. So, if you have any ideas for this beautiful common ball python, drop those name comments because I need some ideas really bad. Now, next on the list, coming in at number 2, we're going to be talking about bearded dragons. Now, anytime anybody talks about common reptiles, bearded dragons have to be on that list. Almost any time I go to any expo or any reptile store, I always see at least one bearded dragon for sale. Now, most commonly, you're just going to find the normal tan bearded dragons that you see absolutely everywhere. But this right here, this is a red leatherback. Now, this guy is going to run you a little bit more money if you plan on getting one of these, but it still is a bearded dragon, and it requires the same exact care requirements. Now, even though these guys are very common, and when it comes to beginner reptiles, these guys are almost always put on the list, I honestly don't believe that they are that good of a beginner reptile. Now, these guys are omnivores, meaning that they eat not only their insects, but they also eat greens. So I have to feed this guy not only dubia roaches, crickets, mealworms, I also have to give him some collard greens and stuff like that. That way he gets some veggies. Now, that's not completely impossible to do. It's not difficult at all. I'm just saying compared to a crested gecko or a leopard gecko where they only really eat one thing. You only have to feed them like the bugs, or with the crested gecko, you add in the paste. With these guys, you have to give them a lot more food and a lot of different variety. These guys also need high heat. These guys sit in around 80 to above 90 degrees on their basking spots. So you're going to need a few heat lamps if you're going to keep them in a colder room. Now, of course, with all of that being said, I still think bearded dragons are a great pet. As you can see, I of course own one. I think they're an amazing lizard. If you want yourself a pet reptile that isn't very small, like the leopard geckos, crested geckos, or even smaller than that, but you don't have space for, say, a big monitor lizard or, say, a tegu, you can get yourself a bearded dragon. Now, this guy is eventually going to get upgraded to a 4x2x2, but him sitting at a juvenile right now, he's doing perfectly fine in the enclosure he's in right now. That being said, let's move on to number 1. Now, for number 1, we're going to be ruining the list with an amphibian here, and we're going to be talking about Pac-Man frogs. As you can see, I just have a thin paper towel substrate right there because I actually owned a Pac-Man frog in the past, and it actually passed away due to impaction. So, just to be safe, I'm keeping it in this setup for now until it gets a little bit bigger and I feel comfortable putting it in some substrate. But he's still eating and doing perfectly fine in here. Now, when it comes to Pac-Man frogs, this is going to be a reptile that you're not really going to be able to hold. Now, if you don't know, frogs actually absorb anything that is touching their skin and will go right into their bloodstream. So, anything that's on your hands or anything like that, if you touch your frog, it could get in there and could cause it to get sick or maybe even pass away. So, I would recommend not handling your frog unless you have gloves on or if necessary, but they still are a great pet. Of course, you see, I keep mine. Mine is a just a strawberry Pac-Man frog, and they're very easy to take care of. They sit in about the same spot all the time. They just like to burrow themselves. As you can see, I don't have the dirt for him to burrow himself because I'm worried about impaction, but I do have a whole bunch of leaves and stuff, and I have a hide in there, so he has somewhere to go. Now, this guy eats every single day. I'll drop one, two, maybe even three worms in front of him, and he'll just suck them up instantly. So they're pretty easy to take care of. There is some things you have to watch out for. Of course, you need them to have the right heat, and you want to make sure that they don't get impaction because they can die to impaction very, very easily. So, even though this is kind of a more difficult reptile on the list, it still is very common. When you think of frogs, a lot of people are going to think of the Pac-Man frog, just a really nice, round, chubby little frog that everybody sees in almost every pet store. Now, just because you can't hold these guys does not mean they don't make great pets. I love my Pac-Man frog. Now, as you can see, mine is just a juvenile. This guy's going to get so much bigger, and he's going to be able to eat such bigger things in the future. Once they're adults, you can honestly feed them pinkies once in a while. Now, with all that being said, that's going to conclude today's video. If you enjoyed this style of video, enjoyed me talking about my reptiles, please do consider hitting that like button and subscribing for future content. I post at least one video every week, and I try to post on my other platforms as well. You can find those linked on my channel. Thanks for watching. As always, stay safe, and see you next time.